Hi, my name's Kelvin Chin, and I thought I'd do a quick live this morning thinking about my mom. And my mom died in 1982 when I was pretty young and she was very young, just in her early 50s. And I thought of all the mothers out there, of all of you out there who maybe have lost your moms early as well, and maybe your fathers as well, but today's being Mother's Day, we're thinking more about mom and our moms. And all the moms out there, I thought I'd do a quick shout out and honor all the moms out there and the fathers who have lost their children too early this lifetime. And I thought I'd do this quick preview on my Afterlife and video conference series that's coming up in a week or so. But that's what prompted me to think about doing this today being Mother's Day. That's what got me started. So just a little history. That's what got me started with helping people with death and dying issues, is my mom's death. It really blew me away. And we talk about grief and grieving and sadness and so forth, and I think that one important point to remember today on Mother's Day, especially those of you who, like myself, have lost our mothers early, any time is often too early, doesn't really matter how old they were, or you've lost children too early, is the fact that grieving involves a lot of conflicting feelings, doesn't it? And sadness and grief are not the same. I still am sad about my mom. You can tell I get a little choked up talking about my mom's death still, even whatever the math is. What's that, 38 years ago? But I'm over the conflicting feelings, the grieving in terms of that aspect, the conflicting feelings that I have about my mom's death and so forth, and how I handled it and how I should have handled it. The shoulda, woulda, couldas, and all that conflicting stuff that goes along with the relationship, and then the death of that person, the exit from our lives, at least for this lifetime for me and my mom, obviously. But the sadness never goes away. The overwhelming part of the sadness, yeah, I don't feel overwhelmed anymore about the sadness that I used to have when she first died in 1982. But the sadness is still there because I still love her, and I think that it's something that we as a culture need to acknowledge, that the love that we have for somebody, and when we miss them, is, I think, directly proportional to the sadness that we feel towards that loss of them. It's a reflection of the depth of our relationship with them. So, just a little side note before I get into talking about my Afterlife and video conference series. But I wanted to start off the little mini talk today with you about that reference point about grief and grieving and sadness, about losing a loved one. In this, some of you may have seen that other previews of my Afterlife and video conference series that I've done on my YouTube channel. You can check out my YouTube channel, maybe subscribe to it if you like stuff that's on there. Or maybe you've seen it on my website, a preview. But I'm going to take a different approach than that's on my website, my kelvinchin.org website. Or my overcomingthefearofdeath.org website. You may have seen the preview that's there. This one I'm going to take a slightly different approach, because what I want to talk about is what's different about my approach, and what's different about my Afterlife and Reincarnation video conference series than as compared to what? As compared to all the YouTube videos that out there that are about afterlife and reincarnation, and the books that are out there, and other speakers on these topics. What makes my stuff different? I was talking to one of my clients Some of you know I help people with death and dying issues, and I teach meditation. I've been doing that for 47 years now. I learned to meditate when I was a teenager. And I was talking to one of my clients the other day who felt she was just inundated with so much information, and much of the information was conflicting information that she saw on all these YouTube videos that you would see about afterlife, about death and dying, about reincarnation, about various subtopics within those larger topics, etc. And I think one aspect of what I bring to the table that's maybe different from what's out there is, well, several things. One is that I take a rational, a logical approach to these topics. And you may think, rational, logical, these are pretty far out there topics. And they are. That said, I still think that we can take a rational, logical approach to thinking about them. And that's how I'm wired. Those of you who've taken other classes of mine or heard me speak at conferences and so forth around the country, around the world, know that about me. I take a rational, logical approach towards things. How can we think about these things in a way that's meaningful and that also makes sense and fits in with our common sense layperson's mind about thinking about things? I think that there are structural principles that exist in the universe that operate on this side in our physical reality, and that also operate on the other side. We call it the other side. You may call it heaven. You may call it different things. Many of you know I work across cultures, 41 different countries so far. So I tend to use words that are more universal, that are less culturally or religiously oriented. But some of you may think of it as heaven, the other side, and so forth, the afterlife. Some of you may think of it as nirvana or Valhalla or different cultural terms. But it's all the same when I talk about afterlife. My point is that there are universal principles that operate on this side and the other side. And we don't have to have different principles and different rules that apply necessarily across the board, that are different on that side and this side, in other words. I think there are rules that do apply across the board from this side and the other side, etc. And from lifetime to lifetime, for that matter, in terms of reincarnation. So that's one aspect that's different from my approach. I think about things consistently and logically, and there's consistency in the thinking. Another aspect of how I approach afterlife and reincarnation discussions that's different from other people is that mine's based on my experiences. It's based on personal experiences that I've had over the last 40, 50 years. Is when I started having these out-of-body experiences, spiritually transformative experiences. I had an NDE when I almost drowned when I was 20 years old. My reincarnation memories opened up when I was 26 years old, so many, many years ago in the mid-1970s. And I started communicating with angels, archangels, and dead people, and people who had never been incarnate and so forth in 1986. So a long, long time ago. These experiences for me, as a result, are not mystical experiences. They're very normal, natural experiences. So one aspect that I bring to the table that's different from other folks, I think, is that I've done no research into this other than my own experience. So many people out there who are teaching, which is fine, but their approach is not based on their personal experience, or may only be partially based on their experience, and then is partially based on their reading and research about other people and so forth and so on, and what other people have experienced or what other people have written about these various topics, whether they're talking about meditation, reincarnation, experience with angels, dead loved ones, all of that. But mine is based on reading, seriously, having read almost nothing. Before I had reincarnation memories, I used to be sarcastic about it. I used to make fun of people. This is true. I used to make fun of people who talked about reincarnation. I thought it was a joke until I started having my own memories. So I come at this from a very different angle from many people. These experiences are very normal for me, and I've kind of they've humbled me in terms of my thinking that I knew about that reincarnation was a joke back in the early 1970s until in the mid 70s I started having my own experiences. Hello, very different approach from most folks. I've read very little about these things. In fact, people ask me, "Have you read so and so's book? It's a great book about such." I said, "No." I just have so many experiences myself that I'm still trying to figure out and interpret and think about from, as I said, this logical, rational standpoint, that I have plenty of material myself to share with myself and with you. And hopefully my perspective on these things helps unlock your own memories or your own awareness or your own thinking, whether or not you have experiences or not yourself, your own thinking about these various topics. What's my underlying objective always with everything I do is to help people reduce their fears about living and dying. Because if I can help people reduce their fears about living and dying, then I can improve the quality of people's lives. They can be happier, they can be more productive, they can be more effective, they can have better relationships, they can be more present with their loved ones. And then when they do die, they will have a more fear-free existence after they die. Because my experience is that, and I've had many experiences on the other side as well, my experience is that we take our minds with us. There's no magic wands that are waved once we die, and everything is perfect on the other side, like some people will lead you to believe. We take our minds with us, and we live in the continual present. So right now is the time for us to reduce our fears, and in order to increase our happiness, and then reduce the suffering that we experience and that the world experiences, quite frankly, because we are just an expression, a collective expression of the suffering that exists in the world. Another aspect of my approach that's different from other approaches out there is, as I briefly alluded to earlier a few minutes ago, I try to take all of the, what I call cognitive dissonance, out of the discussions about afterlife, reincarnation, anything about the dying experience. I've removed all the quasi-science from my discussions. There's a lot of what I call quasi-science. There's a lot of talking about theories and using mathematical probability theories like the quantum mechanics, which is a mathematical probability theory, in order to describe physical reality. And I think these theories are nice theories in order to make people feel good, but are they accurate? And so we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about it from a very rational standpoint in order to explain things on the other side in a rational way without having to resort to using these kind of arguments that are cognitively dissonant. They don't make sense. There are, for example, people will say, I'll give you an example. People will say, oh, on the other side, there's no time. Time does not exist on the other side. There's no time and space. And they'll say, because they're a doctor or a scientist, they have a PhD after their name, or an MD after the name, they say, well, I'm a scientist, and for some reason that gives them authority to say whatever they want to say, even if it doesn't make rational sense from a scientific standpoint. Time is a measurement of change. That's what time is. Does time exist on the other side? Absolutely, it exists on the other side, because change still exists on the other side. Is the experience of time and space on the other side different from the experience of time and space on this side and planet Earth? Yes, it's a very, very different experience from my personal experience and from my talking to many other people who've had experience on the other side. The experience of time and space is very different. but it's a conflation. It is a confusion. It is inaccurate to say that because the experience of time and space is so different from anything you've ever experienced on this side, it's inaccurate and incorrect to say that time and space do not exist on the other side, because time is a measurement of change. Our experience of time may be very different, just like our experience of time on this side. When you're on vacation, time seems to go really fast, way too fast when you're on vacation. And whereas time sitting in your classroom in high school at 5 minutes of 3, when 3 o'clock the bell rings and you want to get the heck out of high school class, and go home and play with your friends, that 5 minutes seems like it lasts forever. That's a different subjective experience of time and space. Yes, we have that. There is a difference. But that does not mean that time and space do not exist on the other side. That's an example of cognitive dissonance. There are many examples of like that exist in the YouTube videos, in books, in spiritual books, written by people who are so-called authorities on these subjects. Why do I do this? Why do I try to clarify things? I try to do this to help my students think more clearly. Because why? Because if you think about it like an upside down, like a V, like an upside down triangle like this, if way down here at the base of the triangle, your thinking is off, and that thinking is off, it creates a belief system that's off, that creates more thinking that's off, that creates more actions that are off, that creates behavior that is way out of alignment with reality. And it's important, I think, for us to manage our happiness, to be as happy as possible, and to reduce our suffering as much as possible, in order to have to have accurate thinking, in order to have that result. So the series that will start soon in a week or so will be a 6-part series, and it's going to happen every other week for 12 weeks. So a six-part series spread out over 12 weeks. The first session, I'll just read the titles of the sessions that we're going to, session titles we'll cover in the series. What happens when we die? So we'll talk about the other side. What's the experience of the other side like? What's time and space like on the other side? Why do people conflate that and confuse that and say that there's no time and space on the other side? What about people who greet us on the other side? This notion that especially with what's going on right now with COVID-19 pandemic and so forth, some people physically dying alone. Does anybody really die alone? And we're going to talk about that. Who greets us on the other side, and how many people can greet us on the other side, or beings, minds, can greet us on the other side. The second session is, can we get glimpses of the other side? I'll talk about NDEs, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and spiritually transformative experiences that can give us a glimpse from this side to the other side. Third session, reincarnation. We're going to talk about reincarnation experiences. My memories go back 6,000 years. I have memories, I have pieces of lifetime, memories from pieces of life, from lifetimes, about 23, 25 lifetimes. I have parts of those lifetimes, memories, and they go back about 6,000 years. And so I'll share those with you. I'll share some of my other friends and family members' memories and so forth. And by the way, this is an interactive series, so I encourage you to get involved and share some of your experiences as well with the class. Because we are co-teachers. I'm not here to give lectures to people and say this is the way. I'm here to stir up thinking, to hopefully get thinking more cognitively consistent and clear, but also to stir up thinking so that you can figure things out yourself. Because ultimately that's what self-development is, isn't it? Self-development, the key word being self. It's all about ourselves, knowing ourselves more. The fourth session, why do people think there's a hell? So we'll talk about hell, we'll talk about the idea of punishment, we'll talk about karma and dharma and sin, and where did those concepts and theories come from? So what was the genesis? Where did they start? these ideas of karma and dharma and hell and so forth. What's the history? And is there a hell? And does karma carry for lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes? Is that a real reality, or is that just a theory that somebody made up? And we'll talk about that in the fourth session. The fifth session, can our friends communicate from the other side? So I've had thousands of communications now since 1986 with beings on the other side. Some of them are known spiritual leaders, and I'll name names in the context of the class, who I've been in touch with, etc., and who's regularly in touch with me, and then also dead loved ones, some of my own dead loved ones, and some of the, quite frankly, dead loved ones who I don't know, who maybe your dead loved ones have come to visit me at times as well. I don't do psychic work, but you know, I've opened up to the other side, obviously. In the context of that fifth session, I also want to talk about how do you assess information from the other side, and how do you assess sources of information? What can you trust? How do you know what you can trust and what's maybe like made up? Because there are great psychics out there, and there's some quasi-psychics, we'll call them, out there. How do you assess that? And what should be your role in the whole process if you get information from the other side directly, or whether you get information through a psychic to you? How do you assess that, and what should be your role in that process? The last session, the sixth session, I call it, what part of us continues after our body dies? So after our physical body dies, what continues? Is it our mind, our soul, something else? We get into that in great detail. I'll talk about the idea of eternity, this idea that, here's another point of conflation and confusion. You'll hear people say that you can experience eternity. You cannot experience eternity. It's illogical. It's logically inconsistent. And we'll talk about that and where that comes from and why people confuse and conflate that. So that's kind of the overview of this Afterlife and Reincarnation video conference series. I'll be starting in a week or so. I do this every 3 and a half, 4 months. I do it again. So I do it 3 to 4 times a year. This is the 7th time I'm going to be doing this series. And each time I do it, more information comes out. It's slightly different. There's that certain structure of the six parts that I mentioned, but there's different information that seems to come out each time I do it. A little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, in new information I get as we go through this together. The sessions are recorded. So if you miss a session, or if you miss all the sessions, you can just watch the recordings of them. I do them live, so it's me doing it live with you live, video conference, just like we're doing now in this recording. So you can hear questions and so forth. And if you cannot make the session, you can shoot me emails, and I'll answer your questions live during that session as well. So this is worldwide. This is available worldwide for people. I've had people on in previous sessions from South America, Central America, obviously North America, US and Canada, many countries in Europe, throughout the UK, France, Switzerland, and so forth, and Australia, in Asia, India, etc., Bangladesh, many countries throughout the world. So I invite everybody to sit in on this class. Hopefully it gives you new perspectives. That's what I'm hoping that I do, is help you, give you new perspectives about thinking about things in a consistent way. Perhaps I hope to give you a framework on which to hang a lot of this other information that exists out there. So I give you a consistently thought out framework to hang all of these other ideas out onto That way it gives you a framework to assess where inconsistencies seem to come up in other people's discussions. That is my hope, so that to help you think more clearly about these things. And again, whether you've had your own personal experiences in this regard does not matter. If you're even just curious about it, having a framework that's consistently thought out will serve you going forward, maybe even as you have your own experiences perhaps, but at least now, while you don't have your own experiences even, you can help, it can help you get not so confused by everything that's out there. Okay? So I hope this has been helpful. Just a mini little preview of what we're going to do in these sessions. The sessions generally go an hour and a half to 2 hours each, depending on the Q&A, because I always open it up to questions and answers at the end of each of the discussions. Okay, so if you have any questions, you guys know how to reach me. You can either message me on Facebook, friend me on Facebook, and message me there, or you can reach me on kelvinchin.org, my website, and you can go on the contact page and send me a message that way. But you can sign up on the kelvinchin.org website. You'll see the Afterlife and Video Conference program page is there. And just you just have to send your email to me basically and then sign up. By the way, nobody has ever turned away for financial reasons, ever, in any of my classes, whether it's this class, my meditation classes, all of my classes. Nobody has ever, did I say ever, turned away in any of my classes, okay, for financial reasons. You can take my class regardless, all right? You just need to tell me. You can explain that. And, you know, all of the money goes to my nonprofit to help fund the work that I do around the world. And I do a lot of work for free, and especially in countries that don't have economies like the United States, like in Bangladesh, you know, where people make $3,000 a year, in other countries in Africa, and so forth and so on. So my work is worldwide, so anything you can do to help, great. But if you cannot afford my classes for whatever reason, it's not a barrier. Take the class. Just let me know, okay? You can register anyway. All right, great, connecting with everybody today. And again, happy Mother's Day to the mothers out there. And my heart goes out to you who have lost your mothers prematurely. Prematurely means for me before you want it to happen. And for most people, that's anybody who has lost their mom. Sending you my warm wishes to everybody, especially today on Mother's Day. Feel free to reach out to me about any questions you may have on a personal, private level as well. I give people a free phone session about anything. So that's another thing you should know about my work. Okay, have a great day, and thanks for being on with me now. Take care.